Kozy Cure's Beginner Sewing series. In this episode, I will be showing you how to prep your fabric. It is important to prep your fabric because fabric can shrink, twist, or even change texture when you wash and dry it. So if we were to sew our final project before prepping our fabric, our final project after we wash it could end up looking smaller, uneven, or even puckered. So it is important that before we cut and sew our project, we prep our fabric. In this episode, I will be going over important terminology in relation to fabric, how to finish the raw edges of your fabric, and how to cut, press, and wash your fabric. Let's begin. Let's go over a few fabric terms that are important to know. First, selvage and grain. The selvage is the finished edge along the long sides of the fabric. So when you go to your hobby store and the person helps you get your fabric off the bolt, you'll notice that they cut along one side of it. That is not your selvage edge. The selvage edge is the side that they did not cut, so the top and the bottom of it. To identify your selvage edge, if you've already folded your fabric and you can't remember which sides were cut, you can identify your selvage edge by looking at all the sides of your fabric, and if you notice one that has little pin pricks in it, this is finished edge, so it will not fray. If you got patterned fabric, it can also be identified by the white strip that is on there. Now, it's important to know where the selvage is because it can help us identify the grain, which is the direction the threads run in the fabric. So the lengthwise grain runs in the same direction as the selvage, so the threads go this way all along it. It also helps us identify the crosswise grain, which runs from one selvage edge to the other selvage edge, because remember, the tops and the bottoms of your fabric have a selvage edge, so basically your threads are going up and down. That's the crosswise grain. This matters because if you cut fabric off grain, the finished piece can twist or look uneven. So it's very important that when you cut fabric, you cut on grain. So you want to cut it in the same direction the threads are moving. The next term you'll want to understand is fraying. And fraying happens when the cut edges of the fabric start unraveling. So here is where the person cut my fabric off the bolt for me, and you can already see that it is starting to fray. So before washing, we need to finish these raw edges, which is what we consider these sides that have been cut on, because it has not been finished. So the finished edges will not fray when you wash it. However, if you do not finish the raw edges of this and you put it in the washing machine, your threads will slowly start to unravel and you'll start to lose more and more inches of your fabric. To finish the raw edges of your fabric, we're going to use a zigzag stitch on that cut edge so it does not unravel in the washing machine. We're going to change it to a zigzag stitch, which on my machine it's number 4. Then I'm going to change it to a stitch length of 1.6 and a stitch width of 4.0. To do this zigzag stitch, you will need your machine loaded with thread, which there is a detailed description of how to do that in episode 2. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put your fabric underneath your presser foot, and you want the needle falling just along the inside edge. So you don't want it going off, you want it just along that inside edge when you're stitching. You're going to go forward. Now we need to back stitch to make sure that the thread is secured. To do that, we're going to click our back stitch button or hold our back stitch lever, and the machine is going to sew backwards. Just do that for a couple of stitches. Then you're going to go back forward again, and that will finish locking it into place. And you're going to zigzag stitch all the way down your raw edges. And these raw edges are going to be on the cut sides of your fabric, so you're going to have 2 full sides to do this on. You're going to have the right side of your fabric to do it on and your left side of your fabric. So you're going to keep going with your zigzag stitch all the way down. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be completely in a straight line because you're going to be cutting from the middle of the fabric anyway. You're not going to be using this very edge. So you can try to keep it straight, which is good practice, but if it's a little crooked, don't worry about it. This is just to prevent your fabric from fraying in the washing machine. Now, once you make it to the edge of your fabric, you're going to go all the way down. Then you're going to back stitch one more time, and then you can go forward one more time. Now your zigzag stitch is going to prevent your fabric from fraying when you put it in the wash. you're going to use your hand wheel to move your needle up into the fully up position. You're going to put your presser foot lever up. You're going to pull your thread out, and then you're going to cut those two pieces of thread that are still attached to your machine. And here is your zigzag stitch. So this is where we backstitched, and as you can see, we went all the way down the whole piece of fabric so as to prevent fraying. You can cut the long pieces of thread that are remaining with some scissors, and once you do this to both sides of your fabric, you are ready to wash it. Now that we have finished the raw edges of our fabric, we can wash our fabric. Now, to wash your fabric, you're going to want to use the same settings you plan on washing your final project on. So whether you're planning on washing your final napkin in cold water and hang drying it, or washing it in warm water and putting it in the dryer, you're going to want to do that same thing to your fabric now. Now that you have finished the raw edges of your fabric and washed and dried it, we can start to press it. So you're going to want to take your fabric and lay it out flat. Now, if your fabric is too large or awkward, you can cut off a rough, oversized section to make it easier to handle. Just don't cut your final exact piece yet. So we're going to press the fabric flat. In sewing, pressing means lifting and placing the iron down instead of dragging it back and forth. This helps remove wrinkles without stretching the fabric out of shape. So if you drag the iron, you can pull the fabric, distort the grain, and accidentally make the fabric shift out of shape, which can affect how accurately you cut it. So, to press our fabric, what we're going to do is we're going to take our iron, we're going to turn it onto a hotter setting. My iron tells me exactly how high I can go when I'm working with cotton. Depending on what your iron says, just do wherever your cotton button is, or just turn it on to a fairly high setting. Because it's cotton, it won't burn as easily as something like silk. So now that you've turned it on to a higher setting, let it warm up for a little bit. Now that you've let it warm up, what you're going to do is you can see these wrinkles. We want those gone to make sure that our fabric is lying completely flat. And this is pressing. You just press it down, press, press, and you just kind of keep pressing. And you can see that that line has disappeared. So it is now flat and straight. This is typical ironing, however, that can distort the threads, as I said earlier. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to press instead. Now that you've gotten all the lines out of your fabric and it's lying completely flat, we can cut out our fabric piece. Now that we have pressed the fabric, most of the lines should have been smoothed out. However, if there are a few remaining, that's okay. You're just going to want to make sure it's mostly smooth, there's no tugging. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify the selvage, which I showed you how to do earlier in the video, and we're going to use that to help us figure out exactly where we're supposed to cut. For this project, I want a 10 by 10 napkin. Now, you can make yours bigger or smaller, you just have to adjust your measurements accordingly. However, because I want mine at a 10 by 10, I need to mark an 11 by 11 inch square. That way, when I put in my seam allowance, I can have up to an inch of room. So first, identify your crosswise grain, which is the one that goes up and down from selvage to selvage, and your lengthwise grain, which is the one that goes parallel to the selvage. You're going to take your ruler, you're going to line it up on your fabric with your crosswise grain. You're going to mark out where the top of your ruler is, where your 11-inch mark is, and you're going to mark all sides of your square at 11 inches. So there's going to be a mark here, there's going to be another mark here, and now you have your 4 points where you need to be cutting. Now, as you saw, I marked out my 11 by 11 inch square with a water-soluble fabric marker. However, if you don't have that, you can just use a pin, find the 11 inches, and just pop it in there so you know exactly where your 11 inches are at. Now that you've marked your 11 by 11 inch square, you're going to cut it. So you're going to line up your scissors, and you're going to do a completely straight cut from each dot or each pin that you marked. Now that we've cut out our 11 by 11 inch square, we're ready for the next step, sewing. I'll see you on the next episode.